Could I ask Andy Lunn, please, to say a few words? Andy's very well known to all of us, of course.
It's with very mixed feelings that I speak to you here tonight, as I have done over many years. It is always, on the one hand, very good to see. I look round the room, I recognise very many comrades and colleagues. I also recognise many friends. It's always good to see you, and it reminds me that I first came to London in 1974, and after a short journey south of the river, something I regret, I have lived, first of all, in Haringey from 1976 onwards, and in Enfield from 1990 onwards. And so when you said that David was a veteran, you actually meant me. And if we're being really,
I said by comparison.
If we're really being honest, Tom Cox is the real veteran here tonight, because I know Tom goes a very long way back in his support for the reunification of Cyprus. So on one hand, it's very good to see everyone, to renew friendships, to have discussions. But of course, on the other hand, it's now 36 years. As I say, I came to London in 1974, and although it was a number of years before I really got engaged with the Cyprus issue, I can recognise how long a period that is, and the incessant, why is it taking so long? So it's always a sadness to me that each year we have to meet here, and each year we have to have, which I do believe we have to have, the Trafalgar Street demonstration. We have to remind everyone, in particular the Parliament of the United Kingdom, and through them the people of the United Kingdom, of this special responsibility, not just on Cyprus, but on human rights issues such as the missing people that we were speaking to earlier on this evening. And as David said, well, there has been some limited progress in being able to find and to catalogue what actually happened to some of those. It's taken a very long time, and it's a very slow process, and much, much more has to be done on human rights grounds, if on no other, to resolve that issue. But I wanted to mention just two things to you in relation to the outstanding division of the island of Cyprus. And I know we could go into great detail about the election of Mr Droussiotis, the conflicting signs we're seeing from Turkey, the general inability so far to move substantially forward in the negotiating process. I won't go into them. I want to make two what I think are essential points. It was Nick Dubois earlier on who said that the new government, and of course it is a new government, will give priority to Cyprus as an issue. I urged the last government, I urged the government before that, before I was in Parliament, and I urge this government to make Cyprus a much greater priority. And why should they do that? Because the United Kingdom has a special role in relation to Cyprus. We've been involved since 1876. We were there at the creation of the independent Republic of Cyprus. We are one of the guarantor powers. That gives us a special international responsibility for Cyprus. Secondly, Britain has a role in the world. It might not be the power it was in 1876 or in 1960, but it still has a role as a member of the Security Council of the United Nations to ensure that the United Nations takes its special responsibilities seriously in relation to Cyprus. And I've always urged the United Nations to do more to engage more with the process, to push, to cajole, to do everything it can with all of the parties to ensure that they have a proper dialogue and a proper negotiation, which often hasn't occurred. Britain is a prominent member of the European Union, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But through its membership of the European Union, I can remember when Ted Heath was joining the European Union, he went to Cyprus and said to Cyprus that they should be involved in the European Union. I was very much played my small part in the campaign to get Cyprus into the European Union, and I do still think that the secret, the code to a resolution of the division of the island will inevitably, at the end of the day, lie through the European Union. But Britain has to do more in the European Union. The other countries of the European Union look to the United Kingdom when Cyprus comes up as an issue. They say, you have a long involvement, you have an experience. There are many Cypriots live in the United Kingdom. And indeed, and we often forget this, very many United Kingdom citizens living now in Cyprus. So for all of those links, Europe looks to the United Kingdom to give a lead, and we must give a much stronger lead. But that brings me on to my last point, and that is, clearly before I arrived, there was some discussion about this, but it is, how do we get Turkey much more involved in the whole process of the negotiations between the two communities? Why should they be involved? Because Turkey is important, and if we look back in the history of the situation, particularly in relation to the referenda and the process prior, when we had Annan 3, we got to Annan 5 before the referendums took place, and that's when the critical influence of Turkey was brought to bear outside the negotiating process, at the end, when they could use their power and influence. We don't want to repeat that situation now, and therefore it's important that Turkey be involved as of now in the negotiations and say publicly where they stand in relation to the issues that are being discussed. I won't say negotiated, but are being discussed between the two communities. How can we achieve that? Well, of course, Turkey is very keen to be a member of the European Union. The United Kingdom, when it was under the previous government, strongly supported that application. This government, as I understand it, also strongly supports that application. But that application has to go through the normal process of any applicant country. And that isn't just about the economics of accession to the European Union. That, of course, will be dealt with through various aspects of the acquis communautaire. It also has to ensure that Turkey, when it becomes a member, complies with the rules of membership. And people have mentioned a whole variety of things. I could talk about what is happening to the Kurdish minority in Turkey. I could talk about the deep state and some of the concerns that there are in the European Union about the influence of the deep state over what happens in Turkey. All I will mention is that, of course, primary amongst the concerns about Turkey's membership is the ongoing situation in relation to Cyprus. And that's indeed, in my view, why the Cyprus government supports Turkey's accession, because that gives an influence over how Turkey becomes a member and under what conditions that membership is achieved. Now, we know that the process is stalled as far as the negotiations are concerned. We heard some of the concerns expressed about not allowing ships from Cyprus to dock in Turkey. All of that as a starting point, must be resolved.